Welcome, amazing friends, to English Empire, where learning English is more than just grammar and vocabulary. It's about understanding the world. Today's lesson is a double win. You'll improve your English skills and your knowledge about one of the most influential thinkers in history, Karl Marx. So, as you listen, don't just learn the words, learn the ideas behind them. This story will open your mind and grow your confidence in English at the same time. If you're enjoying these kinds of lessons, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps me keep creating new and interesting stories for you. All right, are you ready? Let's start the journey. Early life and family background. Karl Marx was born on May 5, 1818, in the city of Trier, in what is today Germany. At that time, the area was part of the Kingdom of Prussia. His full name was Karl Heinrich Marx. His father, Heinrich Marx, was a successful lawyer. His mother's name was Henriette Pressburg. The Marx family was originally Jewish, but before Karl was born, his father decided to convert to Christianity because Jews were not allowed to hold some jobs or positions in Prussia. His father was well educated and loved books, especially about philosophy and law. He admired Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Kant, who wrote about reason, freedom, and human progress. From a young age, Karl grew up in a home full of ideas and discussions about society, religion, and justice. Karl was one of 9 children, though not all of them lived long. His family was middle class, so he could study in good schools. His father wanted him to become a lawyer, just like himself. But Karl's mind was curious. He wanted to understand not only laws, but also why society worked the way it did. Education and early interests. When Karl was 6 years old, he started school in Trier. He was clever and often read books that were too difficult for his age. He loved reading about history and philosophy. As a teenager, he was known to question everything, even religion, which sometimes made teachers unhappy. In 1835, when Marx was 17, he finished high school and wrote a graduation essay titled "The Union of Believers with Christ." Even though the topic was religious, he already showed independent thinking and deep ideas. After finishing school, Marx went to the University of Bonn to study law. But instead of focusing on law, he became interested in literature, poetry, and philosophy. He joined student clubs, attended parties, and even got into some trouble. He was arrested once for being involved in a student fight and was also fined for drinking and loud behavior. His father was not happy and moved him to another university, the University of Berlin, to make him more serious. Student life in Berlin. In Berlin, Karl Marx changed a lot. The university was strict and full of intellectual debates. There, he discovered the philosophy of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, one of the most famous philosophers of that time. Hegel believed that history develops through conflict. When two opposing ideas meet, a new idea is born. This way of thinking is called dialectics. Marx joined a group of thinkers called the Young Hegelians. They followed Hegel's philosophy, but also criticized religion and politics. They believed people should use reason, not faith, to understand the world. One of Marx's close friends in this group was Bruno Bauer, who strongly criticized the church and government. During this time, Marx began to think deeply about society, power, and human freedom. He believed that religion often stopped people from seeing the truth about their situation. He once said, "Religion is the opium of the people," meaning that religion sometimes made people accept unfair lives without asking for change. He studied hard, reading works by Aristotle, Rousseau, Kant, and Hegel. Marx wrote poetry and essays about love and life, and he even wrote romantic poems for a girl he loved named Jenny von Westphalen, who would later become his wife. Love and marriage. Jenny von Westphalen was from an upper-class family. She was well-educated, beautiful, and 4 years older than Karl. Her father, Baron von Westphalen, was a nobleman who worked for the government. Despite their different social classes, Jenny and Karl loved each other deeply. Many people did not believe their relationship would last, but Jenny supported Karl through all his struggles. They got engaged in 1836 when Karl was still a student. After his studies, they married in 1843 in the city of Bad Kreuznach. Jenny became Karl's lifelong companion. She typed his writings, discussed his ideas, and stayed by his side even in poverty. They had 7 children, but sadly only 3 survived to adulthood because of poor health and bad living conditions. Doctorate and first jobs. In 1841, Karl finished his studies and received a doctorate of philosophy from the University of Jena. His dissertation was about Greek philosophers Democritus and Epicurus, focusing on how they understood nature. He wanted to become a university professor, but his radical political ideas made it impossible. The government at that time did not like free thinkers or people who criticized religion and authority. Since he could not teach, Marx became a journalist. In 1842, he joined a newspaper called Rheinische Zeitung in Cologne. The paper wrote about politics, economics, and workers' problems. Marx quickly became one of the main editors because of his strong writing and sharp analysis. He started to criticize the government and supported freedom of speech and workers' rights. He wrote about poverty, unfair taxes, and factory workers' suffering. His articles angered the Prussian government, which eventually shut down the newspaper in 1843. This event pushed Marx to think more deeply about how society and the economy really work. Move to Paris and meeting Engels. After his newspaper was closed, Marx and Jenny decided to move to Paris, France, which was then full of political ideas and revolutionary energy. Paris was the center of socialism and philosophy in Europe at that time. Many writers and political exiles from different countries lived there. In Paris, Marx met Friedrich Engels, a man who would become his best friend and lifelong partner in writing. Engels was the son of a rich textile factory owner in Germany, but he hated how workers were treated in factories. He had written a book called The Condition of the Working Class in England, which described the terrible lives of poor people during the Industrial Revolution. Engels and Marx quickly discovered that they shared the same beliefs about capitalism and injustice. They believed that workers were the ones creating value, but capitalists took all the profit. Together, they began to study economics, history, and politics to understand why society was unfair. The birth of Marxism. While in Paris, Marx started writing more about political economy, which is the study of how money, power, and labor connect. He began to think that the real problem in society was not religion or politics alone, it was the economic system itself. He studied the works of Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and other economists who supported capitalism. Marx agreed with some of their ideas, but said they ignored how workers were exploited. He wrote that under capitalism, workers become alienated. They lose connection with their work, themselves, and each other, because everything is controlled by profit. In 1844, Marx wrote Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts, where he first explained his ideas about human labor and alienation. He also wrote The Holy Family with Engels, criticizing religious and political hypocrisy. During this period, Marx also joined socialist and revolutionary groups in Paris. He met people who believed in equality, freedom, and collective ownership. However, the Prussian government saw him as dangerous. Under political pressure, Marx was expelled from France in 1845. He and his family moved to Brussels, Belgium. Life in Brussels and new ideas. In Brussels, Marx continued working closely with Engels. Together, they decided to develop a complete theory that explained how societies change. They believed that history moves through class struggles, the conflict between those who own, the bourgeoisie, and those who work, the proletariat. They wrote The German Ideology, 1846, where they argued that material life shapes human thinking, not the other way around. This means that people's ideas come from their living conditions and work. If you want to change society, you must first change its economic structure. Marx and Engels also joined a secret organization called the Communist League. The League wanted to unite workers across Europe to fight for their rights. They asked Marx and Engels to write a short book that would explain their goals clearly to everyone. That book became one of the most famous works in history, the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto, 1848. In February 1848, the Communist Manifesto was published in London. It was written in German, but soon translated into many languages. The booklet began with the famous words, "A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism." The manifesto explained the main ideas of communism. Marx and Engels argued that all of human history was a history of class struggles, the poor and rich fighting over control of resources. In the modern age, the two main classes were the bourgeoisie, capitalists who owned factories and land, and the proletariat, workers who sold their labor. They said that capitalism was powerful but unfair, and it would eventually collapse because of its own contradictions. Workers would become more aware of their exploitation and unite to overthrow the capitalist system. The goal was to create a classless society where property was shared and production served everyone, not just a few rich people. The book called on workers to unite with the famous line, "Workers of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your chains." The manifesto spread quickly, especially during the revolutions of 1848, when many European countries saw uprisings demanding democracy and workers' rights. However, most of those revolts failed, and the rulers regained control. Exile and Hardship. After the revolutions failed, Marx's life became more difficult. The Belgian government expelled him because of his political activities. He moved back to Germany, where he started a new newspaper called Neue Rheinische Zeitung. It supported the democratic revolution, but soon, when the government regained power, the paper was shut down and Marx was declared a political enemy. In 1849, he fled again, first to Paris, then to London, where he would spend the rest of his life. London was safer, but life there was extremely hard. He had no stable income, and his family lived in poverty. Marx's wife Jenny sold her jewelry to buy food, and their children often got sick. Sometimes they couldn't pay rent and had to move from one small apartment to another. Marx was often ill, too, suffering from liver problems, headaches, and depression. Despite all this, he never stopped writing. Engels helped him financially. Even though Engels worked in his father's textile company, he secretly sent Marx money every month to keep him and his family alive. Their friendship remained strong through all their lives. Years in London. Deep study. In London, Marx spent many years studying economics and history. He visited the British Museum almost every day to read and take notes. He wanted to understand how capitalism really works, why some people became rich and others remained poor. He read thousands of pages of statistics and government reports. He studied production, trade, money, and markets. Slowly, he developed his theory of historical materialism, which said that all human history is shaped by how people produce and distribute goods. Marx believed that capitalism was built on exploitation. Workers produce value through their labor, but they get paid less than what they create. Marx believed that capitalism was built on exploitation. Workers produce value through their labor, but they get paid less than what they create. The difference, called surplus value, is taken by the capitalist as profit. Over time, this system creates inequality and crises because the workers cannot buy enough of what they produce, leading to economic collapse. He also believed that capitalism would not last forever. Just like feudalism, the system before capitalism ended, capitalism too would be replaced by a new system, socialism, led by workers. Personal struggles. During his London years, Marx's personal life was filled with pain. 3 of his children died young: Guido, Edgar, and Francisca. Each loss broke his heart, especially the death of his son Edgar in 1855. Marx wrote in a letter that it felt like a part of himself had died. Jenny also suffered from poor health and stress. Sometimes they could not afford medicine, yet she continued to support her husband's work. Despite all the hardship, Marx remained passionate. He once said, "Philosophers have only interpreted the world in different ways. The point, however, is to change it." He didn't just want to understand society, he wanted to transform it. Life in London and writing Das Kapital. When Karl Marx settled in London in 1849, his life was very hard. He was now living in a small apartment with his wife Jenny and their children. They were often hungry and cold, and sometimes had no money for rent or clothes. Despite these problems, Marx continued to study and write. He believed that his ideas could help change the world, so he never gave up. London was the heart of the Industrial Revolution. Big factories were everywhere, and thousands of workers lived in poor conditions. He watched how the rich became richer while workers lived in dirty, crowded areas. He visited factories, talked to workers, and studied government reports. He wanted to understand why society was so unfair. In 1850, Marx started writing what would later become his most famous work, Das Kapital, or in English, Kapital, a critique of economic politics. It was a huge and difficult book that explained how capitalism worked, why it caused poverty, and how it would eventually collapse. Before publishing the book, Marx spent many years researching in the British Museum Library, reading books about history, economics, and politics. He filled hundreds of notebooks with notes and ideas. He wanted to be sure that his work was based on real facts, not just opinion. Struggles and poverty. During this period, the Marx family lived in terrible poverty. Sometimes they had to sell furniture to buy food. Marx even sold his own clothes to pay for printing papers. His wife Jenny often pawned jewelry and clothes to survive. Their small apartment on Dean Street, Soho, was always full of papers and books, and sometimes rats. 2 of their children died during these hard years, and Marx wrote letters to his friend Engels saying he was heartbroken. Engels was always supportive. Even though he worked in his father's textile company, he secretly sent Marx money every month. Without Engels, Marx might not have survived. Despite everything, Marx kept writing. He believed that one day people would understand his work and that it would help the poor and the workers. Work as a journalist. Since he needed money, Marx worked as a journalist for many newspapers, especially the New York Daily Tribune, an American paper. Between 1852 and 1862, he wrote more than 300 articles about politics, economics, and world events. He wrote about revolutions, wars, and workers' movements around the world. He even wrote about the American Civil War, supporting the North because they wanted to end slavery. Marx believed slavery was one of the worst forms of exploitation, similar to how factory workers were exploited in Europe. Through his articles, he learned more about how global trade and politics were connected. These experiences helped him build the ideas that later appeared in Das Kapital. The publication of Das Kapital. After nearly 20 years of research and writing, the first volume of Das Kapital was finally published in 1867 in Hamburg, Germany. The book was written in German, and it was very difficult to read. Marx wanted it to be a deep scientific study, not a simple pamphlet. In Das Kapital, Marx explained how capitalism works and how it depends on the exploitation of workers. He showed that in factories, workers produce goods that have more value than the money they are paid. This extra value, called surplus value, is kept by the owners as profit. Marx said that this system creates class conflict because workers and owners have opposite interests. The capitalists want to make more profit. The workers want better wages and conditions. He also explained that capitalism always creates economic crises because the system produces more goods than people can buy. When this happens, factories close and workers lose their jobs. Marx believed that these crises would keep happening until capitalism destroyed itself. He predicted that one day, workers would rise up and take control of production, creating a classless and fair society. This new system, he said, would be called socialism, and later it would develop into communism, a society where everything is shared and no one is exploited. Reception of the book. When Das Kapital was published, it did not sell many copies. Most people found it too difficult to read. Even some of Marx's friends told him it was too long and full of strange words. However, it impressed scholars, socialists, and workers' groups across Europe. Over time, Das Kapital became known as one of the most important books in history. It influenced politics, economics, and philosophy all over the world. Marx planned to write more volumes, but he never finished them completely. After his death, Engels used Marx's notes to publish volumes 2 and 3 of Das Kapital in 1885 and 1894. The International Workingmen's Association, the First International. In 1864, while living in London, Marx helped form a group called the International Workingmen's Association, also known as the First International. It was an organization that brought together workers, trade unions, and socialist groups from different countries. The goal was to unite workers around the world to fight for better conditions, fair wages, and political rights. Marx became the main writer and thinker of the group. He wrote letters, speeches, and reports for the association. He believed that the problems of workers could not be solved in one country alone. The fight for justice had to be international, because capitalism was a global system. The First International helped spread Marx's ideas everywhere, from France and Germany to Italy, Britain, and even Russia. Workers began to see themselves as part of a larger global movement. Conflicts and disagreements. However, the International Workingmen's Association was not peaceful for long. Inside the group, there were many arguments. Some members, like Mikhail Bakunin, a Russian revolutionary, disagreed with Marx. Bakunin believed in anarchism, meaning that all governments should be destroyed immediately and people should live freely without any rulers. Marx disagreed. He believed that workers first needed to take control of the state before abolishing it. This disagreement caused a serious split in the organization. The two sides could not work together. By the early 1870s, the International began to weaken. Finally, in 1876, it officially ended. Although the organization failed, it left behind a powerful idea. Workers could unite across borders. This idea later inspired many political parties and labor movements around the world. Personal losses and health problems. In his later years, Marx's health became worse. He suffered from liver disease, rheumatism, and chest pain. His long hours of study, poor diet, and constant stress made him weak. He also faced deep sadness. His wife, Jenny, became seriously ill and died in 1881. Marx was heartbroken. 2 years later, in 1883, his eldest daughter, Jenny Carolyn, also died. These losses affected him deeply. His energy and motivation decreased. Engels took care of him and encouraged him to rest, but Marx could not recover fully. He continued reading and writing small notes for the next volumes of Das Kapital, but he knew his time was running out. In March 1883, Karl Marx died quietly in his chair in London. He was 64 years old. Burial and Engels tribute. Karl Marx was buried in Highgate Cemetery in London. Only a small group of family and friends attended his funeral, about a dozen people. Among them was Friedrich Engels, who gave a short but powerful speech. Engels said, "Just as Darwin discovered the law of development of organic nature, so Marx discovered the law of development of human history." He meant that Marx had revealed how societies change through class struggles, just as Darwin had shown how species change through evolution. Engels promised to protect and publish Marx's unfinished work, which he later did with great care. Today, Marx's grave has become a famous place that thousands of people visit every year. Main ideas of Karl Marx. Karl Marx's writings are complex, but his main ideas can be explained in simple words. 1. Class struggle. History is a story of struggle between classes, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless. In his time, the fight was between the bourgeoisie, owners, and the proletariat, workers. 2. Labor theory of value. The value of a product comes from the labor used to make it. But workers do not get the full value of what they produce. Capitalists keep the profit, which Marx called surplus value. 3. Alienation. In capitalism, workers become disconnected from their work because they don't control what they produce or how they work. This makes them feel powerless and unhappy. 4. Historical materialism. Human history is shaped not by ideas alone, but by economic systems and material conditions, how people produce and distribute goods. 5. Revolution and communism. Marx believed that when workers understand their exploitation, they will unite, overthrow capitalism, and build a classless society where resources are shared and everyone's needs are met. Marx's influence on the world. After Marx's death, his ideas began to spread widely. Engels continued to promote his friend's work, writing prefaces and organizing Marx's papers. Slowly, Marxism became a worldwide movement. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many socialist parties were formed in Europe, inspired by Marx's teachings. Workers began organizing strikes and demanding better pay, shorter working hours, and safer workplaces. In 1917, the Russian Revolution, led by Vladimir Lenin, was directly influenced by Marx's ideas. The revolution overthrew the Tsar and established the first communist state in the world. Lenin said that Marx's writings had shown him the path to change society. Later, Marxism also influenced revolutions in China, Cuba, Vietnam, and many other countries. Political systems known as Marxist-Leninist states tried to build societies based on his theories, though often with different results than Marx imagined. Criticism of Marx. Not everyone agreed with Marx's ideas. Some people said his vision of communism was unrealistic. Others said he didn't predict new forms of capitalism that could adapt and survive. Economists criticized him for ignoring the role of innovation, markets, and small businesses. Philosophers said he was too focused on economics and not enough on human freedom or culture. However, even critics admit that Marx's analysis of inequality, labor, and power remains very important. Many modern thinkers use his ideas to study globalization, poverty, and class differences today. Marx's family and legacy. After Marx's death, his daughters continued to support socialist causes. His daughter, Eleanor Marx, became a famous writer, translator, and labor activist. She translated Das Kapital into English and spoke at workers' meetings. Engels remained close to the family until his death in 1895. He made sure that Marx's unfinished books were completed and published properly. Over the next century, Karl Marx became one of the most influential thinkers in human history. His works have been studied by millions of students, politicians, and activists. Some have called him the father of modern socialism and communism, monuments and recognition. Today, Karl Marx's ideas continue to be discussed around the world. In Trier, his hometown, there is a large statue of him donated by China. In London, his grave at Highgate Cemetery is a symbolic site for those who believe in social justice. Universities, books, and political parties still debate his theories. Whether people agree with him or not, few can deny his influence. Marx's writings changed how people think about economy, class, and history. He made people question who controls wealth and who benefits from work. He once said, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in different ways. The point, however, is to change it." These words remain one of the most powerful calls for social change ever written. Why Marx still matters today. Even though Marx lived in the 1800s, many of his ideas are still important today. Around the world, people still face problems of low wages, high prices, and unfair working conditions. Many workers still struggle to make a living, while companies earn huge profits. Marx's theory helps people understand how wealth and power are connected. It reminds us that the economy is not just about money. It's about people, labor, and justice. In modern times, thinkers have used Marx's ideas to study climate change, digital work, globalization, and inequality. His ideas encourage people to look for fairer systems and ask, who controls production? Who benefits from it? Conclusion. Karl Marx's life was full of struggle, learning, and hope. He was not rich or famous while he was alive. He lived most of his life in poverty, lost several children, and faced rejection from governments and universities. But he never gave up his belief that the world could be made better through knowledge and unity. He showed that history is not fixed, it changes through people's actions. His dream was a world without oppression, where everyone could live with dignity. Even if his ideas were not always applied perfectly, his vision inspired millions to fight for freedom, equality, and justice. Karl Marx died more than a century ago, but his words still speak to new generations. He proved that one person with strong ideas can change the world, even if it takes many years for others to understand. And that brings us to the end of today's lesson, my amazing friend. You've just learned something powerful, not only about Karl Marx, but also about how to grow your English vocabulary, comprehension, and confidence at the same time. If this video helped you learn something new, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to English Empire, your home for learning English through real stories, powerful ideas, and inspiring journeys. Remember, every time you learn, you grow. Every time you speak, you improve. Keep going. Your English empire is already rising. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you in the next lesson, my friend.